Hello everyone, this is SkullcrusherMD bringing you a new skull crushing educational video. Today's topic is the anterior muscles in the forearm and the hand, as well as their innervations and the function. Now this is a little tricky, but I think we can get this done in a reasonable amount of time. So without further ado, let's get started and let's get crushed with knowledge. Alright, anterior muscles of the forearm. Actually pretty easy to learn. The first thing we gotta know is that there are three layers. There's the superficial layer, the middle layer, and the deep layer. And within each layer, there are a set number of muscles. In the superficial layer, there are 4 muscles. There's 1 in the middle and 3 in the deep. You just memorize it. 4 minus 1 equals 3. 4, 1, 3. In the superficial layer, the muscles start on the medial epicondyle and splay diagonally to the radius. The first muscle is the pronator teres. Second is the flexor carpi radialis. The third is the palmaris longus, and the last one is the flexor carpi ulnaris. This top right picture is a good representation of the muscles. So what you do is you take your right arm and you take your left hand and you hook your thumb around the medial epicondyle of the right arm and you put your 4 digits on your forearm, just like this. And these represent the 4 muscles of the superficial layer. There are 2 ways to memorize these muscles. First, you need to notice that the letters in these muscles go P, F, P, F. So PF, PF can stand for pass, fail, pronator teres, flexor carpi radialis, palmaris longus, and flexor carpi ulnaris. My preferred method is with the mnemonic Professor Pat Foo. And I think this is a little more detailed because it goes PR, pronator teres, flexor carpi radialis, palmaris longus, PA, and flexor carpi ulnaris. So here's a fun fact. If you bring your thumb and your, well, preferably pinky finger together, you actually see this tendon, and that tendon is actually your palmaris longus, and it is also absent in some individuals. These muscles are innervated by the median nerve, except for the flexor carpi ulnaris, which is innervated by the ulnar nerve, and that sorta makes sense given its name. The flexor muscles flex as well as abduct and adduct the wrist, while the pronator teres pronates the forearm and flexes at the elbow. Next, if you were to cut the tendons of the muscles in the superficial layer and retract them, you would see the middle layer. And in the middle layer, there is only one muscle, that is the flexor digitorum superficialis, also known as FDS. Its innervation is the median nerve, and its primary function is to flex the middle phalanges at the proximal interphalangeal joint. Now, if you cut the tendon of the FDS and retract it, you will get the deep layer, and the deep layer consists of 3 muscles, that is the flexor pollicis longus, FPL, the flexor digitorum profundus, FDP, and the pronator quadratus. These muscles lie close to the interosseous membrane, and so they are all innervated by the anterior interosseous nerve, which is a branch of the median nerve, while the FDP muscle, the profundus muscle, also gets innervation from the ulnar nerve. And so, just to review, the 2 muscles that receive innervation from the ulnar nerve in the forearms are the flexor carpi ulnaris and the flexor digitorum profundus. So the flexor carpi ulnaris muscle only receives innervation from the ulnar nerve, and the flexor digitorum profundus muscle receives dual innervation from the median and the ulnar nerves, and the rest of the muscles are just all from the median nerve. Now for function, the pronator quadratus pronates the forearm, the flexor pollicis longus flexes your thumb, and the flexor digitorum profundus flexes a lot of things, but most notably the distal interphalangeal joint right here. Mnemonic time. So this, you're just going to memorize the deep layer by saying triple P. So it goes P for pollicis, flexor pollicis longus, P for profundus, flexor digitorum profundus, and P for pronator quadratus. All right, let's review everything. So superficial layer, Professor Pat Foo. That goes pronator teres, flexor carpi radialis, palmaris longus, and flexor carpi ulnaris. Hook your thumb on the medial epicondyle and splay your forefingers and you'll get the 4 muscles. Next is a middle layer. That is just the FDS. Third, or deep layer, is triple P, flexor pollicis longus, flexor digitorum profundus, and pronator quadratus. Now all these muscles flex at the wrist or in the hand and also pronate your forearm. And these muscles are mainly innervated by the median nerve with 2 exceptions. The flexor carpi ulnaris is innervated by the ulnar nerve, while the flexor digitorum profundus receives dual innervation from the median and ulnar nerves. And that is it. Next, let's move on to the muscles in the palm of the hand. And memorizing these is not too bad at all. First, we must know that there are 2 loaves of bread in the hand. So 2 loaves. There's a loaf here, and there is a loaf here. And this is the thenar eminence, and this is the hypothenar eminence. And what I mean by this is that in the thenar eminence, which is the meaty part of your thumb, there are 3 muscles that control your thumb. So they are the pollicis muscles. And what I mean by a loaf is that L stands for the lumbricals, but O stands for the opponens pollicis, the A stands for abductor pollicis brevis, and F stands for the flexor pollicis brevis. And since these muscles are all short in your thumb, they are all brevis, because the word brevis means short in Latin. And as you can see, there is another loaf of bread on the other side on the hypothenar eminence, which is the meaty part below your pinky, right over here. And you can see that there is an opponens digiti minimi, an abductor digiti minimi, and a flexor digiti minimi, going along with this mnemonic. And they are called digiti minimi because their actions are enforced on the small finger. So let's do a brief review. So I said there are 2 loaves of bread, one on the thenar eminence and one on the hypothenar eminence. The thenar eminence being the thick muscle belly by the thumb, the hypothenar eminence being the thick muscle bellies by the little finger. And in each loaf, there is always an opponens, which is the deepest muscle. There is an abductor and a flexor. And these are all named pollicis because they go to the thumb and control the thumb. The second loaf of bread also has an opponens, an abductor, and a flexor, and this is for the digiti minimi because they control the small finger or the pinky. And since these muscles are all small and in the hand, they are also termed brevis, not to be confused with the longest muscles that come from the forearm. As for the functions of these muscles, the opponens muscles allow opposition of the thumb and pinky, which allow them to come together like so. And the abductors allow the pinky finger to move away from the ring finger. And abduction of the thumb means your thumb moving in a plane towards you away from the fingers. Now flexion of the little finger is just flexing it down towards your wrist, while flexion at the thumb is if you hold your fingers in a gun and you move your thumb up and down. When you move your thumb down, that is flexion. And when you move your thumb up in the same plane of your fingers, that is extension. Now, if there is an abductor pollicis, there must also be an adductor pollicis. So this is the adductor pollicis, and it adducts the big thumb. Furthermore, each hand has 4 lumbricals, which are these muscles in between right here. And they allow the hand to flex at the metacarpophalangeal joint and extend at the interphalangeal joint such that it creates this L. And that is easy to remember because if you make an L with your hand, that is the function of the lumbricals. Lastly, there are 3 sets of palmar interossei muscles and 4 sets of dorsal interossei muscles. The palmar ones adduct your forefingers, and the dorsal ones abduct your forefingers. And you memorize this with the mnemonic pad and dab. The palmar ones adduct, the dorsal ones abduct. And you can actually see these muscles in action. So if you just take your hand and look at them with your fingers together and you slowly abduct the fingers away. So you start with your index finger, you're gonna see the muscle move that way, and you do your pinky finger, you're gonna see the muscle move that way, and when you abduct your middle and ring fingers away, they both move away from each other. So that accounts for the 4 muscles of the dorsal interossei. Whereas for the palmar interossei, with your fingers all splayed wide, you take each individual finger and you bring them midline into your middle finger. So that's 1, that's 2 with your ring finger, and that's 3 with your pinky finger. And what you're going to notice is that the middle finger doesn't move at all, and that accounts for the 3 palmar interossei muscles. And learning the innervation to the hand muscles is actually quite simple. The mnemonic you're going to learn is half, loaf, half. And these are all innervated by the recurrent branch of the median nerve. And what this stands for is that half of the lumbricals, specifically the lateral 2 of the 4, the opponens pollicis, the abductor pollicis brevis, and the flexor pollicis brevis, or half of it actually, are innervated by the median nerve. Now the other half of the lumbricals and the other half, the deep head of the flexor pollicis brevis, are ulnar. And after that, all the rest of the muscles are innervated by the ulnar nerve. So it goes half, loaf, half, median, rest, ulnar. The last thing I want to make sure is that we understand how the finger flexes. So I had mentioned the flexor digitorum profundus tendon and the flexor digitorum superficialis tendon. So the FDS tendon actually links up to the middle phalanx, while the profundus tendon goes all the way to the distal phalanx. And you're going to see actually that the profundus tendon runs through the superficialis tendon, and the superficialis tendon creates a nice little X. And this X is called Camper's chiasm. Now I had mentioned that the superficialis tendon flexes at the proximal interphalangeal joint, and the profundus tendon flexes at the distal interphalangeal joint. And you can see this when you test the tendons. So when you press down on the person's finger at the middle phalanx and ask them to flex the distal phalanx, that is the action of the profundus tendon. Whereas when the PIP is flexed here, that is the superficialis tendon. And I want to make sure that this is clear for you all, that the profundus tendon actually travels through the superficialis tendon at the Camper's chiasm, and they insert at different points of the finger and cause flexion of the finger at different points. And that's it, folks. That is all the anterior muscles in the forearm and hand, as well as their innervations and functions. Now, in honor of this video, the next time we go to the gym, we are all together going to do 20 wrist curls so that we can make those forearm muscles extra big and beefy. I will see you in the next video, and peace out.